Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com presents the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com.
All right, hey everybody, welcome to episode 241 of the Strength Coach Podcast, the official podcast of Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com, the world's best source for strength and conditioning information. Brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com. All right, I'm your host, Anthony Renna, and the show notes are located at ContinueFit.com. It's where I keep all my resources, including Strength Coach TV. If you're going to open a gym, make sure you check that one out. All right, today on the StrengthCoach.com Coach's Corner, spoke to Coach Boyle about a forum thread called Using Hip and Knee Dominant Exercises in the same session, takeaways from his in-service by Fergus Connolly, and building an initial client base, how he did it when he started over 20 years ago. For the Results Fitness University Business and Fitness segment, Alan Cosgrove is on to do a rapid-fire Q&A. He's never done this before, but he got a bunch of questions that probably couldn't have been a whole segment, so he's going to answer 4 questions that people sent him. For the Functional Movement System segment, Brett Jones is on to talk about running the screen and focusing on the number that you get, not trying to figure out why they scored what they scored yet. So just focusing on that number and moving on while you're screening. For the Train Heroic data-driven coaching segment, Adam Doughty is back with Tim Robinson, and they're going to talk about confirmation bias. For the MariGold Bars, hit the gym with the Strength Coach segment. Remember, MariGold Bars, high-quality protein with all premium ingredients. Check them out at MariGoldBars.com. Use the code StrengthCoach10. You'll get $10 off your first order. Guys, my favorite bar, you have one every day. All right, for today's episode, we have on legendary NFL strength coach Al Miller, one of the pioneers in the industry. This is a 2-part interview. So this is obviously part 1, and we're going to talk about the current state of strength and conditioning, maybe some things he might have done differently. And we'll also talk about the book he co-authored. It's called The System. It just came out from On Target Publications, and this is a book that he did with 2 other legends, Johnny Parker and Rob Panarello. So we're going to get into the book and how it came about and some concepts of the system. Lots of great stories from Coach Miller. Just such a great guy, completely genuine, and he really is one of the pioneers. Started his first paid strength coach job in 1980. So lots of great stuff coming up. Lots of things to get to. So let's get on the phone with Coach Boyle. All right, now it's time for the StrengthCoach.com Coach's Corner with Coach Boyle. StrengthCoach.com, the world's best source for strength and conditioning information. You can try StrengthCoach.com out for 3 days, just $1. You have access to all the articles, videos, and programs, as well as the best forum on the net. It's the only place to have full access to Coach Boyle. He's on every day. He even checks it when he goes to Barcelona. You can check it out at StrengthCoach.com. Coach, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Anthony. How are you?
All right, really quick, how was that Barcelona trip? It looked awesome.
Actually, it was great. It was more fun for Cindy than me. Cindy discovered something called Airbnb experiences. So much like you can book an Airbnb, you can now book like tours and things through Airbnb. So
very cool.
She went on a bike tour, a photography tour. She did mosaic tile. She had a really good time. I had to work a little bit, but.
Yeah, I was following her on Instagram and all those pictures. I was like, man, this is awesome. You must be having a good time. So, well, she was anyway. So anyway, Coach, I want to go over really quick. Actually, you had Fergus Connolly come in, the author of Game Changer, which is one of the more popular books over the last about year. He was on the podcast as well, but he came and did an in-service for you. There's always so many people love what he's doing. Talk to us about any takeaways you had from the in-service.
Well, one, I think he's an amazing speaker. And he's one of those guys. I think there are some people you look and think they're much better on when they're writing, and there's other people you see they're much better when they're presenting. He has kind of that Irish gift of gab, so he's really, I think he presents better. The writing to me is really dense. Like I told him, it's a great book, but it's a thick book. You really got to work your way through it. I don't know how many, I have it sitting here. It's probably 400 and some odd pages. and a lot of charts and graphs and flow
Or
charts.
the textbook, yeah.
Yeah, like I told him, I think it would be it's a college class for a semester. That's really what it is. And obviously well worth the time invested. But for him to just get up there and speak, it was very different because he spoke from the standpoint of what he actually is. You think of him as a sports scientist, but the reality is he's a coach who's worked in the NFL. He's worked in major college football. He's worked with Liverpool. He's worked in rugby. And a lot of what he really put emphasis on that I think was great for us, whether it's with our athletes or adult clients, is like the KISS idea of keeping things simple. He kept talking about, have 3 things, just 3 things, try whatever it is. If we're talking about recovery, okay, 3 things that they can do. If we're talking about nutrition, 3 things that they can do. Just ways to really make it simple. And it was funny because I've gone back and forth over time with everybody at MBSC about nutrition, and everybody they get so complicated, and people are talking about, well, you want to have yogurt and berries and mix in, whey protein powder that's non-GMO. And I'm like, people aren't going to do that. Like no one's going, no kid is going to the store or saying to his mom, can you get me Greek yogurt and blueberries? And then can you order a non-GMO whey protein? And so he was just like simple, which is what I like. Like I said with Dan McGinley and I were talking yesterday, I said, what I want is, okay, 3 things you can eat at Dunkin' Donuts, 3 things you can eat at McDonald's. You know what I mean? Because that's the reality of our kids. And in some ways, it's the reality of our adults.
Sure. You can get the book, Eat This, Don't Eat That, or something like that. Don't eat this, eat that. But,
well, that's another great. Food Rules is another great one. Food Rules. Don't eat food that can be passed out a window. Don't eat cereal that changes the color of milk. I loved Food Rules. Even though it was a little bit, probably a little bit vegetarian oriented. It just had some great stuff. And I just, me, I love simple. And I felt like Fergus, in spite of creating this incredibly dense book in presentation, was really able to get across and make it simple. The staff absolutely loved it. They ate it up. So anybody that's listening, if you're looking to book a speaker, get him in because he's good and he really can get it right to the level that you need it to be at.
Yeah, I had an easy conversation with him on the podcast. Good stuff. Coach, there was an interesting question, and I think this comes up a lot, but people sometimes are afraid to ask, and that was the hip knee dominant in the same session because and this is for an adult exercise program, but it was 2 days a week, and he was wondering whether they should have, separate, only have knee dominant day and a hip dominant day. And certainly for adults, obviously I've worked with adults, and my answer was I had them all in the same session because my people were working 2 to 3 times a week, and I would just split it up. I split up the bilateral with the unilateral. So if I did a bilateral deadlift with a kettlebell or a barbell, I did a unilateral knee dominant with like a lunge or a single leg squat, and then I would switch them up on the Wednesday. I would do a double leg, a bilateral goblet squat, and then have the single leg deadlift. And if I did 3 days a week, I would use the single leg hip dominant because there's not a lot of hip dominant exercises, but I would do single leg hip dominant. I felt like that was the most important one twice. In that week, Monday and Friday, for example. But give us your thoughts on this idea. Because again, I think more people, he was more worried about the CNS, which you said is not even an issue in this, but talk to us about this idea about doing them during the week.
Yeah, I agreed actually. Your answer and Elliot's answer. Elliot's answer was almost exactly what I would have said. I tended, and you said bilateral, unilateral, he said more intensive, less intensive. So I would do almost exactly what you did. If we it's like goblet squat and 1 leg straight leg deadlift, and then it might be trap bar deadlift and 1 leg squat. Something along that line would be kind of what our basic programming would look like. I would disagree slightly with what you said. I feel like there's too many hip dominant. I look at it and think, I want to do bent leg stuff. So I want to do slide board leg curls, and I want to do straight leg stuff. So I want to do 1 leg straight leg deadlift, and I want to do bent leg stuff more in the shoulder elevated bridge category. And I find sometimes I almost need more hip dominant slots than there are. So sometimes for me, the simple solution is I get rid of the bilateral stuff. So I might be thinking, okay, we might do split squat and 1 leg straight leg deadlift one day. And then we might 1 leg squat and do like hip lift and slide board leg curl the next day. So yeah, I think you definitely want to mix them up. It doesn't make sense to me to have, okay, it's going to be more of a knee dominant day where we might do goblet squat and one leg squat and then have more of a hip dominant day. I would not do it that way. I would lump it all in together. But what I find is I want one knee dominant slot and two hip dominant slots if I can do it. But sometimes that ends up making a longer workout than I want, particularly if we're doing some power stuff, because we end up basically with effectively 4 pairs of exercises when I want 3 most of the time. So so what we've taken to doing is and somebody else wrote this and they did a really good job. I can't think in the forum post, but basically like for us, it's kind of like there's a power pair or power tricep in the beginning. So maybe it's kettlebell swings with planks or with chops or with lifts or something like that. And then there's usually like a knee dominant and a push. And then the second pair would usually be a hip dominant and a pull. We've tended to make that kind of second strength pair into a little bit more of a circuit where there might be 4 exercises. So there might be 2 hip dominant exercises and then some sort of pulling exercise and then some sort of core exercise. And that'll look a little bit more, it's like, I feel like, okay, if we get beyond 3 exercises, beyond kind of the tricep idea, then I start looking at it and saying, well, we're going to do that as a little bit of a circuit where we're just going to go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 and then back to 1 with maybe a little bit less rest. But either way, we're definitely going to get knee and hip in the same.
Yeah, I think for me, part of it with me is, again, my lens with the older guys is, I did have a little bit more extended warm up. My guys need a little bit more warm up. They're not as active as maybe, some younger people might be. And so I always focused a little bit more on the warm up. And everybody did the plyos and med ball. So we do like an extended stuff with that as well. So that did, by that time we have 20 minutes left. So I guess, for me to have, that's why it had to be simplified for my client base.
Right. And that's what I find that's when I end up sort of sometimes where the exercise is really 2 pairs or 2 triceps for me when I have those people who need more warm up. And then it's a little bit, but like I said, a lot of times when I have that, there's no bilateral at all. It's like, bench press, split squat, or push up, split squat, and, ring row, 1 leg, straight leg deadlift, with a couple of core exercises chucked in there. That tends to be kind of my go-to.
Yeah. Coach, I want to talk about, because I think a lot of people that are listening obviously are, we do get a lot of questions in terms of how did Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning, evolve and develop and start, really, because, it was back in the 20s when that happened. No, but like how you started,
ago, not in the 20s. So let's clarify that.
Okay, in the 90s. But just in terms of, people, almost like marketing, building that initial client base. That was actually the name of the thread. And you had talked about, look, you built your business around kids that needed strength and conditioning. Most of your early high school clients were the direct opposite of collegiate and pro athletes that you worked with. So your roster was talented kids who needed an edge, skinny kids who needed to gain weight, chubby ones who needed to lose weight. And when you think coaches, when they start a program, they make 2 key mistakes. Number 1, they chase the best athletes. And number 2, they try to network with high school coaches to find athletes and clients. So I get 1, 2, you're going to have to expand on more. Talk to us about both of those, though.
Well, I think, as I said, what happens when people start thinking, hey, I want to do sports performance, is they go after the star player type kid. And that's not the market. That kid is very much in demand by everybody. He's usually playing, or she's usually playing multiple sports. They're usually on multiple teams. They usually have time constraints, and they don't see the need, generally speaking. So I guess for me, it's sort of the obvious, like, hey, I paint houses. I'm going to go look around for houses that don't need paint. I'm not going to drive around and say, oh, that's a beautiful house. It's in perfect condition. I'd like to paint that one. No, that's not the way it works. And I don't think it's any different for us as strength and conditioning people. You need to start with people who have a really strong need for your service. And so that's generally going to be a kid who's, for whatever reason, maybe a little more engaged in the struggle. like I said, a kid who's a little bit overweight, or a kid who's a little bit underweight, or a kid who's a little bit out of shape, or a kid who's not quite strong enough. That's where the real meat of the market is at. The second part, the high school coaches, we have just found high school coaches in general to be a complete dead end from a referral standpoint, because it's always the same thing. You either have a super motivated high school coach who wants to train his kids himself, or you have a high school coach who doesn't really care if the kids train. We have not found enough people in the middle to make that worthwhile for us. Whereas, and this, I can't say why this is, and it's probably a generalization, and I'm probably insulting some very good high school coaches, but what we found is that the select program coaches are much more inclined to push their kids into doing something extra. They are much more inclined to say, you really need strength and conditioning. I need you to do this. And we just can't get the high school coaches to kind of get behind it and do that for whatever reason.
Yeah, interesting. Devil's advocate on the best athlete. I know one case, for example, where sometimes when you go for that really better athlete, usually in a high school, if they're the best, they're usually a captain, or because, just because they're the best doesn't mean they're a good leader. But a lot of times, if you can get that guy, and I know the kid downstairs did this, he got the star player, and it really was a nice domino effect, because everybody wants to know what the best players are doing, usually. And if they're a good leader, they'll get some of the kids that really do need it to come in. So have you found that at all?
Yes, if you get the right kid. I do agree. That has happened to us sometimes. If you do get that kind of Pied Piper type kid, that ends up working out really well. But what we have found in general, if you look at if you look at the big picture, is that those kids do not tend to be great. Not only do they not tend to be great referral sources for us, they don't tend to be kids that we can get in the room. I think if you can get that kid, though, yes, that kid becomes a massive asset, and everybody will follow that kid. But I guess my problem is that most people think that that's the way it's going to be, and then it doesn't end up being that way. That kid has to really have that kind of magnetic type personality, that real captain who's going to be thinking, I want everybody to follow me kind of guy. And I think, unfortunately, in today's day and age, there's a lot more of the selfish kid, the all about me kid, who's the best player, than there is that real true captain type kid who's just thinking about the team, and I'm going to get the whole team in here, and I'm going to get everybody to come with me, and everybody's going to get better. Yeah.
Coach, later on in the thread, you mentioned ADs as well, and you didn't mention in the beginning in part of the thread. What's the problem with the ADs as well? Because you would normally, like from the outside, you think, oh, go for the AD, because they're the guy they're the boss. They're going to tell everybody. Why not ADs?
Yeah, same thing. We just have just experientially total dead end. We have really, I can tell you that we've had a handful of really good high school coaches who've been awesome for us. A handful. I would say we've had even a smaller handful of athletic directors who've been awesome for us. But in general, if we contacted 100, we might have got 2 or 3 who actually sent us kids. So it just, to me, when I look at where our customers came from primarily, I would say they came much more out of these kind of select program type things and even one of the things we used to do is we'd try to email, like in Boston, they call it all scholastic. It's really not all scholastic. It's like an all-star team, but those kids are in the paper. We used to just send we'd actually send snail mail to the school care of that kid, knowing that might actually get to the kid. Whereas if we went to the coach, it might never get to the kid. And so it's really hard, because the reality is you're marketing to parents to get kids. You're not marketing to kids in general. And so, and again, that's why somehow trying to reach the parents, one of the things I've been a big advocate, if you can get email lists of teams, or those type of things, if you see someone who sends like a mass email out to whatever, all their Pop Warner football kids or all their hockey kids, if you can get that list and add it into your constant contact list, and then be able to get directly, because again, directly to the parents is really the way to go. But that's not an easy thing to do in terms of how do you find these parents? How do you get their email address? The high school coach or the athletic director is kind of an easier person to get to, but they do not tend to be, at least in our situation, in our geographical area, they are not super motivated to get kids into a private facility. All we ever hear is stuff like, I can't tell the kids what to do. I can't tell them to spend money. There's just a million excuses for why they can't encourage those kids to train. And as I said, I just tried with David, the guy who started the thread. I just tried to give him some real response, like, hey, this is what worked for us. And it's, again, because sometimes, like I said, that really motivated high school coach, the high school that has a weight room, those kind of things. One of the local high schools hired one of our former interns, and then they hired Anna Taco as an assistant. I'm not getting, I still do get a few kids from there, but I'm not getting nearly as many kids from that school as we used to, because now they have a good strength and conditioning program. They don't have any motivation to send them outside and pay for it. So it's a little bit of a catch-22 situation that you end up in as you try to figure out, hey, how do I, the best way to get clients is to do a really good job with the ones that you get. But it's kind of like, all right, how do I get that first one? And then how do I get that first one to generate the referral? And what we found is that the referral comes from the parent who suddenly looks and sees what happened to that kid. And you probably saw that. You've had your friend's son that was in there. All of a sudden he starts doing better and looking different and skating faster. And other parents, the automatic reaction is, because of how competitive parents are, in the Joe Ehrman sense, right? Parents start thinking, what's that kid doing that my kid's not doing? And that tends to be a really good referral source in and of itself.
Absolutely. Good stuff. All right, Coach, we'll let you go on that note. Thank you, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Ant.
All right now at Perform Better, there's free shipping on orders over $59. Some restrictions do apply, so check it out at performbetter.com. Don't forget the Speaker School is coming up next week, October 25th. That's with Thomas Plummer, as well as the Startup School on November 10th. So another good, like Strength Coach TV, if you want to open a gym, the Startup School is a good opportunity for you to get a head start. You can check it all out at performbetter.com for all their products and info on their educational seminars.
Hey, it's Brett Jones here for the Functional Movement Systems segment of the podcast, and just want to touch on something related to running the screen. We screen by the numbers, so to speak. So when you get somebody in the proper setup position, they understand what's being asked of them, they perform the movement, a number should pop into your head. It was a 3, not a 3, a 2, a 1, depending on which one of the screens you're running. When that number pops into your head, I want you to remember a couple of things. Number one, that's all that should happen, is when that you've got them in the proper setup position, they move, boom, number pops into your head. That was a 3, 2, 1, or they had pain, it's a 0. You are not obligated to understand or know why the person scored a 3, 2, 1, or 0. 0 is obvious, they had pain. But the number is all that matters. So you're screening somebody, boom, they get a 2, 2. Well, that means they're good to go. They don't need any correctives for that pattern. And there's no Y attached to that score. So a 1, 1 doesn't attach any meaning to that. A 1, 1 or a 1, 2 or a 3, 1 simply says, hey, come look at this pattern. There's no Y involved. The score just says, hey, come look at me. And once you go look at them, we'll stick with maybe a leg raise example. Scoring a particular set of numbers on the leg raise does not mean that you have a particular fault because of a particular score. The score just says, hey, look at the leg raise. And when you look at the leg raise, that could be an anterior chain issue, a posterior chain issue. It could be lumbopelvic motor control. There's a lot of different things that could be impacting that leg raise. So as you're screening and you're scoring, we're not attaching meaning, and we're not blaming based on that score. If you have a 2, 1 right, left leg raise, I'm not stretching your left hamstring. I'm going to look at the leg raise pattern because, like I said, it could be anterior chain on the opposite side. It could be lumbopelvic motor control, or it could be a little bit of a a posterior chain issue on that left side. So the correctives are where we start figuring out the why and the what we need to do to make the improvement. So screen by the numbers. Make sure they're in the right setup position. Make sure they understand what's expected of them. Watch them move. Boom, number pops into your head. That number simply says where do they rank or rate for that movement pattern. It does not attach meaning, and there's no why involved. This is going to make screening much better for you because now you're not obligated to figure out why a particular score is happening at that moment. Just give it a number. Interpretation of results and corrective strategies are where we start going into the why and the what we're going to do to efficiently change that movement pattern. This has been Brett Jones for the Functional Movement Systems segment of the podcast. For more information, go to functionalmovement.com.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the fitness business section here on the Strength Coach podcast. I am Alan Cosgrove from Results Fitness University, and we have a special episode today, a very special episode, rapid fire Q&A, right? I'm just going to I've got about 4 questions that we got sent in, and I'm just going to hammer through them quickly. Neither one's really deep. First one, what should be the first things you do when you're working on developing a gym to open that'll make you stand out in your market? Solid question. First thing first is to figure out your onlys, right? When we first opened Results Fitness, we were the only training gym in town, right? Now, probably that's not going to happen in any of your towns right now, but what is it about you that makes you truly different than the alternative? That's your marketing, that's your positioning, right? What problem are you trying to solve? Are you a training facility for golfers, youth athletes, fat loss facility, general fitness? Is it short workouts? Is it a 30-minute workout? What are you trying to, how do you position yourself differently? So what problem are you trying to solve, and how are you the solution? And just start thinking, what does this market need that you can give them? Question 2, most underrated ways of marketing. That's a good one. I think there's a pendulum effect in marketing where something that didn't work before always comes back, and something that's fresh now won't be working as well. Right now, Facebook advertising, social media advertising is hot and still effective, but that market's getting crowded and it's pay to play, and you'll be spending a little more money all the time for that to work. So expect that to transform over the next 12 to 18 months. So underrated. I would probably say a content-based newsletter. That's something you're going to see start coming back, where you will mail a physical newsletter to clients and prospects with good content and good information, and obviously a strong offer. So direct mail is probably underrated. I know email open rates are down. However, don't ignore email. We filled our last mentorship solely through email, and one of our coaching group members told us that she's been on that list for 6 years. So it's 6 years before she made a buying decision. So you got to keep marketing and reaching out. So email still works very well for us. But number one for us is still getting in front of people and doing some type of seminar or talk. So we get out there, we do lunch and learns, we talk to different companies, or we have something to invite people to where we bring them in and we do a seminar or something at our gym. Right? Good question. Question 3, when an employee is not performing up to expectations, when do you let them go? All right, we hire slow and we fire fast, right? That's the first thing, is if behavior isn't changing, they need to go. So the first question to ask yourself is, have I given this person the skills to do the job? Can they do the job I'm asking? Do they have clear expectations of the job I'm asking? If it's no to them, and it's your fault and you have to train. If it's right to both of those, that they have the skills to do the job and they're clear and they're just not performing up to par, then we move to our 3 strikes and you're out system. It's a verbal warning at first where we explain exactly what the problem is and what they need to do to correct it. After that, if there's no change, and that length of time is really up to you, it can be as little as 7 to 14 days, as long as 30 to 60 days, that let's move you to a written warning, right, if there's no improvement. And after that, the next step is up to and including termination. Right, so I don't waste a lot of time if you have to let someone go, but everyone deserves a second chance to correct their behavior. But always ask yourself, is it your fault? Because you saw something in this person in the first place that had you hire them. Let's go back to that and remember that you saw something in them. Maybe you haven't given them the right training or the right skills or the right tools to do the job effectively. So start with that, and then we go through 3 strikes and you're out. And last one for this segment today is I am desperately trying to pull myself away from the day-to-day running of my business. Question, is it best to document all the things I need the new hire to do prior to hiring them, or is it easier to train them as I go and document that, or am I overthinking it? Well, I think that there's a couple of things to do there. It would be great if you had a manual ready to go before you even hire this employee, but we don't know if that manual will work until you hire that employee anyway. So I think you could start with a rough outline somewhere between these two, where you have your base idea of how this is going to look and how the training period is going to look. And then you document as you go what worked well, what didn't, and you tweak it and develop it. So then you're kind of saving some time because you're learning how to train staff as you're training staff, but then you have this manual ready to go for your next hire. So there's some scalability attached to it. So that's it for this episode of the Business of Fitness. Follow up with me on the Strength Coach forum or reach out to me on social media with any further questions we have. And I'll do another one of these rapid fire Q&As coming up soon.
Hey, this is Adam.
And this is Tim.
Welcome to the Trainer Hook Data-Driven Coaching segment.
Yes.
Today, Tim, I wanted to talk about something a little different, maybe introduce a new concept to our listeners.
Cool.
Don't want to get too nerdy or mathy about it, but what
you.
we're going to talk about is related to Bayesian reasoning and Bayesian statistics. All that means now is that I have like a held belief, a prior belief about the way that something works.
Okay.
And I have to figure out a way to integrate new information into that belief.
Okay.
Right? So I have to say, okay, I believe this, contradictory evidence comes along. What do I do with that? And, like by Bayesian reasoning, I'm supposed to update my belief about the way the world works appropriately based on
the new information.
Based on how strong it is and how good that evidence is, right?
Yeah, totally.
But what really happens? What really happens is, let's take an example, Sam.
Yeah.
Let's tell you, and this is a real thing. Let's say we're in a Reddit argument.
Yes, I'm going to win. Keyboard warrior.
R/weight room. Here we are. R/fitness is even better. But here we go. Let's say I say, hey, there's this study that just came out, and it showed that people training to failure, like on one set, right? So low volume training, high intensity type training, training to failure, got similar or better results to people who are doing more sets. What would you say? What would you probably do?
I mean, my mind would probably disagree, but I'd probably be willing to investigate that study a little bit.
Okay, I'm gonna be the big boy here. I'm gonna be honest and say I probably in my mind think that's freaking stupid. I don't believe it. I don't buy it.
Don't agree with it.
Everything I know disagrees with that statement.
Yeah, I'm nicer.
I'm a tough guy behind a keyboard, right?
Yeah.
So, but hey, so you say, hey, let's charitably, right? Let's try to break this down. I think probably at least 3/4 of people would outright discard that claim.
Right off the bat.
Right.
Title. Read the title.
Again, your prior belief is that, hey, more volume is better, more sets are better for all reasons, kinds of reasons you might think that. So at least 3/4 of people would just read that statement and they would just argue right back.
Sure.
Okay. And this is a real thing because the study actually just did come out. And, it has limitations like all studies, but it's a real thing. Now, then another subset of those people, let's say now we have 75%, let's say a 15% more would actually click on the link and go to the abstract.
Okay.
And they read the title and they read the abstract and they find something wrong with it.
Poking holes now.
Right. They use noobs. Doesn't apply to anything.
Right.
Game over, you lose.
Yeah, you lose.
Right? Again, that's not the way science works, but that's how my human minds work.
Yeah.
And then a few of those people, we have the remaining 10% of people who come across this claim, are actually going to go and read and try to figure it out and do this and that. This is just confirmation and bias in practice.
Okay.
Which is the phenomenon that where if you have a really strongly held prior belief, right, and new information comes along, you just outright dismiss it. This is human nature.
Yeah, no question. It's simple, right? You agree with what you like, and you disagree with what you don't like.
Right.
That's essentially what it is.
Right. So this shows up in a lot of ways. We encounter new information, we throw it out, but we also just don't seek out things that contradict what we believe. So you surround yourself and you read blogs and you listen to podcasts that just, they tend to repeat the things that you already know.
You've walled yourself in, kind of, right?
Right. Yeah. And so what you have to be careful of is shining yourself with groupthink.
Sure.
That's going to do it for us today. Go to trainheroic.com to start your 14-day free trial. And when you're talking to one of our representatives, tell them the Strength Coach podcast sent you for 10% off a year of the Pro or Elite Edition.
All right, now it's time for the MariGold Bars Hit the Gym with a Strength Coach segment. And today I have on one of the legendary coaches who just co-authored a book called The System, and that is Al Miller. He's one of the most decorated strength and conditioning coaches in NFL history, with a career that spanned over more than 4 decades and left a lasting impact at every level of the profession. After a 9-year stretch at the collegiate level, following 5 years at junior high and high school, he made the jump to NFL under head coach Dan Reeves. And so he worked with Coach Reeves starting out with the Broncos, but over the next 19 years, they worked side by side in Denver, New York, and Atlanta. Worked with people such as John Elway, Michael Vick, would ultimately appear in 5 conference championships and 4 Super Bowls. In addition to those multiple championship appearances over the 23-year career, he also coached the 2 Pro Bowl teams, received numerous awards, including the NFL President's Award, the NFL Strength Coaches Award, Strength Coach of the Year Award, and the NFL Strength Coaches Lifetime Achievement Award. Like I said, recently he just co-authored a book called The System with 2 other legends, Rob Panariello and Johnny Parker. Coach Miller, thanks for doing this.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoy talking it, and I appreciate you having me, and appreciate you letting me have an opportunity to talk about the things I love to do in the book.
So much has changed. So I want to talk to you about what you feel about the current state of strength and conditioning, and what are some of the things you like and maybe some of the things you dislike?
Well, one of the things that, I was around when, Boyd Epley got everybody together, and there wasn't enough of us to have a good card game, really, and we all met in Lincoln, Nebraska, and tried to come up with the formulation, and did, of a strength coaches society and organization. And, I was strength coaching before that, and it was a non-paid job. When I started, you didn't get paid for it. It was like, you also did the fields and, and this, that, and the other, and then you just things that you did, but there was not any money exchange hands or for the services that you rendered. So it was a non-paying job up until I took my first collegiate job, first strength coaching collegiate job at Mississippi State. Then that's when I went from basically coaching football, track, and weight training the whole time to strictly just nothing but strength coaching.
What year was that, Coach?
That I went strictly to strength coaching?
Yes.
It was 1980.
Wow, okay. What year did you start the coaching?
I started coaching in 1970. Anthony, and I started coaching at Lee Junior High, and I had probably one of the real formidable coaches in my life and my career. And he was track athlete at the time of the Sonny, who was the great quarterback. That gum. He was anyway. He ran track at LSU, and Y.A. Tittle. He and Y.A. Tittle were really best of friends, and he taught me there in junior high things that lasted me all the way up until the last day I tooted a whistle, yeah.
Wow. So talk to me about some of the things that, you see now that you kind of feel you do like, and some of the things you don't like.
Well, going back to the things I do like is, and I don't think I've covered that enough, but I remember doing, we inaugurated Johnny Parker into one of the Hall of Fames he's in Nashville, Tennessee. It's been a long time ago. And I had already retired from football at that time, or strength coaching, and got out. And then I looked out there, and when we had the evening dinner, and to see the numbers of strength coaches that were sitting in the room, and it just kind of shocked me, Anthony, to be honest with you, and I just had to stop, and because it just bumfounded me, and then, but that was a really, really good thing to see, because you could see the health of the industry, and you could see the health of the movement by the people that were getting involved in it and doing it, and to know that there were just a handful of us to ever get the thing started to begin with, and to see how it had grown up to that point, boy, I tell you what, it's almost like watching, kids. If you're a father, and you watch your children grow up, and all of a sudden, boom, they go off to college, and you cry your eyes out. So, yeah, that was one of the great things about it, to watch it grow, to watch the coaches get strength coaches get the money, be paid in accordance for the work that they do. And I think that's marvelous. I really do. And the realization by the head coaches and athletic directors that realize the importance and the time that is spent with a strength coach, and that strength coach can be able to mold these young men and be able to take them down the positive route, and sometimes negative route, depending upon the quality of the strength coach. But those things like that, some of the things, it's just, you look to the dark side, which I don't like to spend my time doing that, but you can't help it. But with, it's plastered all over the news, the deaths of the kids and things like that. Those are always discerning, but people don't understand a lot of times all of the things that are involved with that, and all they think of is brutality or something like that, which the greatest majority of the time is not the case.
Absolutely. You think what would you feel? What do you feel like is some of the root of that? Do you feel like it's maybe kind of we're trying to push too much? We have too much competition. Like on one hand, like you said, it's great to see the industry grow, but now with social media and people are trying to make a name for themselves, could that be part of the root of it, or what do you feel?
Well,
like?
It's always could be. I mean, I think those have viable, and I'm sure you're right on some of the things. I don't think there's any one thing that you can ever say, Anthony, to say, well, this guy here's got a big ego or something. Well, we all of us have egos. Just depends on, don't let it get in the way of doing your job, And so I don't know. There are different circumstances and things that go on with people that will create those things, and there's a sundry reasons, like I said. So I don't think you can just pinpoint a thing, Anthony. I think a lot of it depends upon the situation, the person, as a strength coach, so forth, so on. The demands that are made on him by the head coach. There's a lot of things that can be attributed to.
Absolutely. Coach, what would you do differently if you could kind of go back to those times that you feel like you'd like to maybe have done better?
I think, the older you get, that's a great question. First of all, the older you get, the smarter you become, or you should become. Mm-hmm. And, I always knew I did not have all the answers. I wasn't egotistical enough to believe that. And I went to whomever, and back then, there was really just a handful of people. And I grew up in a period of time, doctors told you not to be able to lift weights, because it was bad for your heart. Coaches didn't want you to lift because it make you muscle bound. So, you were hamstruck on a lot of this stuff, but there was not a lot of. Alvin Roy was he's the father of all of us, and he started in the late 40s, and then that just matriculated. And fortunately enough, he was down in this area where I live. He came from Baton Rouge, that's where he was, and try to go to him and find out knowledge. So the knowledge is the one thing that I would try to be able to seek, and I wish it was out there and available. I can't tell you how many Soviet sports reviews I read in my life, and just anything, just information. So that's the one thing, and understanding now the information at hand that is included in the book that we wrote. I mean, there it is. It's a lifetime of work of trying to turn over stones, come up with the right answers, and I came across two other guys. Well, I came across more than that, but just a handful of us that really wanted to be able to get better,
absolutely,
produce the very best.
Yeah.
So I think that is the one thing. I think they asked me that question one time years ago at a collegiate strength coaches deal, and I said information. I stand by what I said at that time, and that was it. Information on how to train the guys properly.
Yep. And
how to be able to, because I know this, and you could tell early on. Didn't take Einstein to figure out that no two athletes are the same. But there are a lot of them that are in close facsimile of the traits that they have. So how to be able to train one in comparison to the other, and how to do this in comparison to the other to make that one that's not quite as good as the one that is, and to make the one that is real good even better than what he is. And so there you go in a short synopsis right there, exactly what the apple I was chasing would be, Anthony.
All right, good stuff. Coach, all right, let's get to the book, the system, because we're going to talk about a bunch of different things within the book that'll come up. So, was this something that you always wanted to do, or was this something that kind of you got together with Coach Parker and Coach Pinarillo?
Another great thing. Man, I had a few opportunities that people would come to me, writers at different stages of my professional career, and asked me to write a book doing one thing or the other. And I just, I said, no, A, I don't have time, and B, I just really don't have the real want to. I just never, it's not I just never did. And so consequently, time goes on, years go by, we get out of the business. But the way that Johnny, and it's in the book, Johnny found out about, we used to take trips over to Russia, and they would talk about training, and that was the time before the curtain came down and the wall, and so there were a lot of restrictions, and but their athletes were far superior in a lot of respects with their training than what we were doing, and the trying to learn these secrets from them, and trying to do that, that really provided, I guess you would say, the impetus for a lot of this book. And anyway, long story short, Johnny ran across a man named Gregory Goldstein. Gregory was about the second or third ranked lifter in the USSR back in the 50s. Went through all their training regimes, went through all of their, and started coaching. Went through and understood the entire system, and finally he defected, came to America. I'm going to take a guess at this. Johnny knows better than I, but I'm going to say around 84, 85, and was in New York City. Johnny found out about him, and Johnny called me and asked if I wanted to come up and listen to what he had to say, and Johnny said, I think this guy's pretty good. So we did, and that's where we got involved in knowing about the particular type of periodization. Before then, Dr. Mike Stone, who's one of the top researchers and one of the foremost authorities in my time, and still is, on strength development, he had a periodization, and we followed it to the T. But in looking at this, I could see that had a lot more manipulative type of means and ways by which to be able to provide some of the things that that the other system, which was kind of linear periodization, did not provide. So that's how we found out about it. We all got together, and after it was said that we found out how to make it work, this, that, and the other, all those years ago, and then we said, look, this thing's going to give us a distinct advantage, and I think we can see that. And so we said, let's keep it quiet, and just knew that it was going to get out sooner or later. Somebody had to figure it out or find the guy that we did, but didn't happen. And so all these years later, here we are with it. And I've not seen, that doesn't mean that it's not out there, Anthony. I don't know, because I'm not on the cutting edge like you are of seeing what's out there on today and time. But I'll be honest with you, I've not seen anything like it in my time. And the way we've taken all of this is what we've tried to do is take the best of all the worlds. Not just lifting and it's not just weights. It's it's Don Chu, Medvedev, Vershansky on all of the the jump drills, the Charlie Francis's, the Ben Tabachniks, Lawrence Seagraves, and on the speed development. So it's a culmination of everything rolled into one, and I think that people will say that they are some of the best, and that's the one thing. Al Vermeil, and Johnny Parker and I got together, and we, what Johnny and I had to do is go pay Mr. Goldstein a substantial amount of money. Well, not substantial. People think it was millions. It wasn't. But the New York Giants and the Denver Broncos organization had to. That's who we were working for, to be able to get him to explain this to us. And we did so. Al Vermeil was already a top-notch lift coach, and one of the best, if not the best, strength coach probably has ever been. And he'd gone on, it was all of it, Don Chu and that, and Rob Panarella with Johnny, and they would make overseas trips and things, and all. So we just kind of melded together, started putting our information together. I used to call Al for me. I called Bob Ward so many times at the Cowboys, he stopped taking my calls. But he got gunshot from me. I'd wear him out, and of course Mr. Roy, and he passed away all too soon. But man, Johnny and I would wear him out too. But it was one of those things that we just put together, and it was a culmination of a lot of our efforts. It really was.
All right. Well, yeah, I know you had talked about, you guys, you talk about Al Vermeil. One of the things right away that you guys talk about is his hierarchy of athletic development.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Al, like I said, this guy's he's really good. And I think anybody in their right mind that can sit and visit with him and knows anything at all about strength training will attest to that.
And certainly the listeners of this show, because we've had him on a bunch of times, and he's always he's always one of our more popular guests on here too.
Oh, I tell you, he's a mess now. He and I have had a lot of fun down through the years, and what a true friend, and what a great mind, and he really understands it in and out. Now, I don't know if you know this or not. Were you ever, or have you ever been around the timing machine that he made?
I was not, no.
Oh, buddy, I tell you what now. He made one, and that was back when I was at Alabama. That was in the early 80s, and he made them. Boy, I tell you, that thing would do everything, but Oh, it could do. It had sundry different things. It was great. I bought 4 of them there at Alabama, and I bought 3 when I went to Denver, and they proved very beneficial.
Talk to me about that, though. What was it doing? You say a timing machine, but what exactly was it doing?
Well, it did a number of things. It obviously would get your time on anything, but it got reactionary time. It got your in-depth jump, amortization phase time, gave the height of your vertical jump. It did a lot of things. It really did, and I probably didn't know and understand half of what it did. But for what it did do, and for the things that we were using it for, we used to have this right here, Anthony. Got a little time, so I can expound, as you say, on some of this stuff. But we used to have football camps, and that started out. Now it's taken hold of identity on, but we used to bring it in, and we would take, and we'd have so many kids in there, and you'd say, well, at the end of the day, we'd go back and we'd say, well, how about this Anthony kid? Did he have fast feet or not? Well, I don't think he did. Another coach, oh yeah, heck yeah, he did. But then you get into a big rigmarole about that. When all you had to do, we'd take them over and just time them. You had 4 different places that you did 4 different tests that you wanted to do to determine their athleticism. And it was all within the legal means by which you had a camp going, but it also gave you great insight to what kind of athlete you had. So those things like that was extremely beneficial for, and I think coaches of today have taken those things and have done very well with them also. So they give you a very legitimate, it's not a biased time of speed and or whatever else you would be measuring.
Absolutely. Coach, I want to get into periodization. I know even, especially now, I think we see less coaches using this, and we've seen some criticism of this idea that it's overstudied, especially like a Coach Boyle will feel like it's been a little overstudied by some people that aren't really aren't coaches like you or your co-authors, certainly legendary co-authors that you have. Talk to me about that idea, because somebody might say, listen, I mean, how hard can it be? We have a preseason, we have an in-season, we have an off-season. The season's going to tell us where we should be. And you guys say in the book, you weren't looking to reinvent the wheel or retread the works of others, but the biggest distinctions to be made using the current concepts of periodization in the book deal with linear block and undulating periodization. Can you just kind of give us an overview of your thoughts on periodization and maybe some of those comments?
Well, you touched on something. I wanted to interrupt you, but I wanted to let you go. But you said, how do you know when it's the kid that lets you know. The kid will let you know. And again, going back, you learn if you've got the basic pyramid of Al's hierarchy of development, which was very ingenious, and it says on the very base of that, then the first thing that you've got to create is a work capacity phase. Now, in the book, it explains everything tit for tat of exactly what you need to do. Istvan Dvorak is a name out there. Do you know that one? Do you know
Sure, I do, with the complexes, absolutely.
Sir, I'll tell you what, it's an ingenious piece of thinking and teaching, and the things, and I finally, I've been doing it for a long time. I stole that from him, and boy, I tell you what a great tool that is, because think about what it does, Anthony, for kids or anybody. I mean, I did this in the pros, and I tell you, you get these pros coming there, they say, I've signed for $5 million, whatever. I can do all this, do all that. They couldn't even pass the very simplistical test, and that was, just a one-legged squat, or a squat with a dowel rod overhead and a snatch grip, or be able to do 3 series of complex with 40% of their body weight. They'd falter and fail. So how in the world are we as coaches and teachers supposed to say, give him a green stamp and socially promote him to the next level where you're squatting with hundreds of pounds on his back and doing all the exercise you're going to? you're opening up a can for success. I mean, for, problems right there and the injuries. It's not going to be any success that comes out of that. So the thing is that the periodization you got to have that work capacity phase. It's got to be built. Kids have got to be able. If I can't squat my body weight, how in the world can you tell me, Al, I want you over there with 225 on your back and squat that? That doesn't make sense, does it, Anthony?
No.
So it doesn't. I mean, really, you don't have to be a PhD behind your name to figure out that just don't make sense. And it, still and again, people will say, and they'll talk enough to where they'll finally say something to convince themselves that they're doing the right thing, which in essence, they're not ever getting close to the right thing is taking care of that kid, what he can do. So to answer your question, you got to watch the kid. The kid will tell you if he's ready to go to the next step or not. It's a pretty easy checks and balances deal to be able to use. And, if he can do these things, which are outlined to do, he's ready to go on. It's a great exercise with the complex, again, Anthony, to establish the correct motor pathways for the bar to move on all of the functional exercises you're going to do from a standing position. And when you're in a standing position doing movement, you're building athleticism. When you lay down, you take athleticism out of the equation. Because basically all sports it comes from, the force into the ground. And that's what it teaches you, that along with the correct pathway to move the bar. As long as you got a good teacher there that knows what he's looking for and can teach it, then you can get the kids to do it. And the great athletes take a shorter period of time. It's just like the smarter kids in class. Doesn't take them long to figure out what 2 to 2 is. Okay? Mm-hmm. And it's no different. I mean, people try to say it's not. Some can do things athletically, some mentally, but that's where we're talking about the athletic part of it. So there you go. That's what it is. Once you can do that, then you're ready to jump into, to the strength end of it. And then go on up, just like the pyramid says, speed, strength, speed, and the very golden crown at the top of the tree is speed.
Coach, then would you say that sometimes we overthought periodization? If really what you're saying, I
don't know if they've overthought it. I don't know if that it could be. I mean, you could say that. Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of people that have written things out there, but the one thing that I saw with what was done with this is it coincided with the amount of volume that you're going to choose per month, 4-week blocks, okay? We already know they're 4 and they're 6-week blocks. 4-week blocks for the kids that we train is going to be more than adequate, and that'll give the time for adaptation to whatever Sunder's forces and strength, whatever you're putting them under, they'll have time to adapt. And it also gives in there high volumes, low recovery days, and a recovery week at the end of it. And, that was the same with linear. But the undulation on there, it kept that adaptation syndrome, and it really would keep it in a flux, and it would make yourself have to adapt really fast. I think that, with the exercises you were doing, if they were, I say fast, if you had selected the right exercise to be used at the right time, that's what I was trying to say.
Coach, let's get into the bottom of the hierarchy, and that is evaluation and testing. And you guys in the book talk about the overhead squat and the single leg squat. Are those for you the 2 most important movements?
Yes. Well, in finding out of joint immobility. You're going to find a lot of kids that cannot do that, Anthony. They can't do it. I mean, just by golly, Coach, I want to do it rather more than breathe, but I just cannot do it. I can't squat. And you'll see them now. I've had a sundrous ones of them. No, all of them, all the time. So what do you do? What do you do? Okay, poof, all right, here I go, Coach. I got them. And now what do I do with them? They can't squat. Where are you? What do you do? Found this out, and I wish I could remember who told me this and showed me this, but he needs credit for that. But I don't. It's another thing I've forgotten. But showed me that you take basketball, volleyball, small physio ball, put it against the wall, put the crux of the ball just about where the waistline is on your back up to the ball on a straight up and down wall, and hold your hands out in front, good squat base underneath you, and just squat, leaning back on the ball, just like you would lean back in a lounge chair. Lean on the ball and go down and up. And you will find the kids that are really bad, Anthony, really bad with squatting, they'll still rise up on their toes and get the heels off of the ground and have a hard time of sitting back on the ball. They want to lean forward because they know the leg strength's not there, and they want to bring in the next strongest muscle, which is going to be the back. And get them to lean back right there, and then before long, the movement pattern itself will loosen the joints up, and then consequently, they can be able. It's just a great stretching movement exercise. Then start taking some dumbbells, put into your hand, and then you start working leg strength. Then you can go. I've had kids going up, handle 85 pounds in each hand because they enjoyed doing that right there, and as much as they did a back squat. And then you take them off that in about 2-3 weeks and put them back on underneath the bar. They can squat just like nobody's business.
Okay, so really, essentially, in between, and no disrespect to Coach Vermeil's hierarchy, is in between that evaluation and testing and the work capacity would be almost like a corrective phase.
No, not really, because you don't have enough time to be in a corrective phase.
Okay, so
you don't have time. That's one of the things we're all working against, partner, and it's time. You only have so much time in your off-season program, so you don't spend trying to be able to find these things. Once you do these are built into the program. This is what you're going to do every day.
Okay.
This is a warm-up deal that you're going to do every day. This is an everyday deal that you're going to do. One-legged squat or the squat with a dowel rod. Now, you'll do that for a while, but then let's just say Anthony does it extremely well. You're a good athlete, and you're ready to go. So, all right, Anthony, you can do 3 sets of 6 as your passing grade on one-leg squat. If I see you do that correctly, the heel's down on the ground, toe is up, and your nose is good and back. You don't get a lot of lean. The knee doesn't come out over the foot. And you're sitting back, and you're giving the strength to the areas that need it that you're going to have to squat with, and you're going to have to be able to come off the ball with, and so on and so on. You're ready to go. Then next thing is to check you with the dowel rod. If you can squat and and drop it down, keeping the bar behind, and then in a good snatch position, then we'll take the dowel rod away, give you the bar, and then just keep matriculating it on up the line. Same way with the one-legged squat. If he's ready for that, then then he can do it. Then the complex. And now, if a kid can't do the complex, can't squat, then what do? You take the squat, it's in the book in there, you take that squat out of there, let him go ahead and do a half squat and a push press off of that. But go then and train that particular one lift he cannot do as an individual exercise. Bring him off to the side. That kid needs individual attention. Not all of them in the classroom are going to be Einstein. You're going to have them go off at different levels and different times. You got to be able to learn how to be able to adapt and teach them all. Yeah, they're not all, they don't all dance to the same tune. So you got to understand your athletes, be able to deal with each one of them, and it's like, can you do it? Certainly you can. I did it. If I can do it, anybody can do it. So, you know, Johnny did it. Al Vermeil did it. So on and so on. There's a lot of them that do it. So that's what you look for. So it's not just a seek and find type of deal like like I see some programs that's all they do is, you know, this right here. No, you don't have time for that. You've got to get strength work going in there. And that's his strength. If a guy can't squat his body weight, how much more weight you going to have to put on him for, you know, I mean, it just doesn't make sense, Anthony.
All right, well, that's going to conclude part 1 of the Al Miller interview. Remember, we are going to have part 2 next episode, and the book is called The System. We're going to have links to the book at continuefit.com, so make sure you tune in next week for part 2 of the Al Miller interview. All right, that's going to do for episode 241 of the Strength Coach Podcast. Remember, you can try strengthcoach.com out for 3 days, just $1. You'll have access to all the articles, videos, and programs, as well as the best forum on the net. It's the only place to have full access to Coach Boyle. He's on every day. To access that offer, go to strengthcoach.com, click the Join Now button to get started on your trial. Special thanks to Chris Parrier and the folks over at Perform Better. Remember, they got free shipping on orders over $59. Speaker School and the Startup School coming up at the Perform Better Functional Training Institute. Check it out at performbetter.com for all their products and info on their educational seminars. Thanks to Coach Boyle and Coach Al Miller for sharing their insights and philosophies into the world of strength and conditioning and performance enhancement. Don't forget, Coach Miller will be on next episode as well for part 2. Stay tuned for that. Thanks to Adam Doughty, Tim Robinson, and Train Heroic. Head over to trainheroic.com to start your free 14-day trial. Guys, you got to get in on this online training thing. Absolutely imperative. Let them know I sent you. You'll save 10% off your first year of Train Heroic Pro or Elite Editions. Alan Cosgrove and the Results Fitness University Business of Fitness segment. Check them out at resultsfitnessuniversity.com. Brett Jones and Functional Movement Systems. Check them out at functionalmovement.com. Thanks to MariGold Bars, my favorite high-quality protein bar with all the premium ingredients, low sugar, and they taste amazing. Check them out at marigoldbars.com. Use the code StrengthCoach10, and you'll get $10 off your first order. All right, my name's Anthony Rana. Go to continuefit.com for all my stuff, including Strength Coach TV. Thanks again, and I'll speak to you next time.